Hi, friends. I've got my book here, Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species, and my little talk here is called Much Ado, Charles Darwin as the father of the nothingness of nothingness. So basically, I took all of his chapters and I went, and I'm going to go chronologically, just by chapter titles, and give my own kind of spin off of what these titles mean in the chapter titles. So his first, he has an introduction, then he goes into chapter 1, which is a variation under nature. And I think of the variation as like fatherliness, so kind of like him, under, and nature as our home. So it's like father within the home. Chapter 2 is struggle for existence, and struggle means for me those feelings that come behind, those behind feelings, and existence means poetry. So it's kind of like translated as those behind feelings for poetry, and poetry is kind of like non-literalness, I would say. Chapter 3, natural selection or survival of the fittest. Oh, wait, I think that's 3. Anyways, natural selection, or I've got my numbers here kind of funny. Natural selection, which means passive awesomeness, and survival of the fittest, which is like Shakespeare's impact, his survival, and of the fittest, being fit is like pleasure. Fittest is pleasure and delight. So it's like the Shakespearean impact of pleasure and delight, according to my understanding. The laws of variation in another chapter are the laws being non-literalness of variation, which is kind of like a charades game. So the non-literalness of a charades game. And as a charadian, that's the heaven that I go to. I recognize this as an important, the idea of the laws of variation. So in chapter 6, he talks about the difficulties of our theory. And the difficulties I just combine with the idea of parents and theory with siblings. So it's like the parents of our siblings. It's the same as the difficulties of our theory. Chapter 7, he talks about Charles Darwin talks about the miscellaneous objections to the theory of natural selection. So I think of objections as basically like friends. Like Blake has this quote where he says opposition is true friendship. So I was thinking of objections as oppositions. So I just put friends here to the theory of natural selection. So that the theory of the siblings of natural selection, passive awesomeness. So it's like kind of like saying the miscellaneous friends to the siblings, your brothers and sisters, friends, of this passive awesomeness of even you. So chapter 8 is all about instinct, which I feel like is motherliness, or being like a mother. Instinct and motherhood go together for me. Chapter 9 is hybridism, and I just think of hybridism as old friends. Chapter 10 is on the perfection of the geological record, and I think this one's pretty important. On the imperfection of the geological record. Imperfection for me is that way of attaching things or mapping things onto something, and the geological record, geological would be like the expert or the literal, and the record would be like the sparks or beginnings. So it's another way of saying it is on the mappings of the literal beginnings. Chapter 11 is on the geological succession of organic beings. And the geological succession, again, is the expert or literal, and succession would be hesitation or figuring things out, and figuring hesitation that deals with like kind of like a putting together the pieces of the puzzle of organic beings. Organic would be wonky or awkward, and beings would be like those activities or experiments we go through. Or even like with me, like as a painter, the beings can be like colors for painting or using colors in paintings. So basically, this is on the expert or literal hesitation or figuring out of those wonky activities or experiments that we do. In Chapter 12, the geological distribution, geographical. The geographical is the literal, and the distribution would be like throughout the external world or the city or the world, the neighborhood, the reality out there. And then in chapter, I think it's 15 or so, or 13, he continues that. And then finally, you get the mutual affinities of organic beings, or morphology, embryology, and rudimentary organs. So the mutual affinities are those conflicts people crave. Uh, the organic beings are those wonky activities, the awkward ones. Morphology would be learning in general or love of learning. Embryology would be like our interests or keeping track of people, that kind of thing. And rudimentary organs are just like the creative activities we go through. So it's like saying the mutual conflicts people get themselves into of those wonky activities or awkwardnesses that come from learning, or a love of learning, from our interests, keeping track of people, and the rudimentary activities we do, our creative activities. So this basically concludes, after his conclusion, his chapter that's the conclusion. This concludes my talk of Much Ado, Charles Darwin as the father of the nothingness of nothingness, the origin of species. Origin is a nothingness, and species is a nothingness. Thanks for listening.